All right, so let's move on to deductive analysis, right? We've talked about induction or inductive analysis. What's the difference here with deductive? Okay, simple way to start off, and I'm just gonna, there's no spoiler alert here. Deductive analysis, you start with a thesis as opposed to induction. You start with a thesis, then you work backwards, if that makes sense. Okay, work backwards to establish your claim. Okay, pull what you need, not dishonestly, of course, and you'll find some people do that, right? You don't want to give, think about politics, especially. We talked a lot about politics in this class. But people sometimes only let you know what they want you to know. Okay, but a critical thinker and a honest academic will pull what is needed, and this will be a sound thesis. Okay, when you start off with. But let's take a look at what the Hoffmans talk about here with deductive analysis. Let me just start off here. Okay, unlike inductive thinkers, deductive thinkers start with a thesis, just like I said, also referred to as a major premise, instead of discovering one through the implications of particulars or through the implications of our sources. I think that would have been a better worded way to say that there. I didn't write it. I didn't write the textbook, so I can't. They have the textbook, so got to work with it. Actually, it's a great textbook. I'm saying more, so like I haven't written one. Anywho, usually the thesis is an established theory of truth that has matured through previous inductive thinking. Okay. So in essence, these aren't exclusive, but once you've had specific and levels of inductive thinking, then this is the way you can think about it as well. Then how do you work deductively to prove your claim? Okay, and is now being used as a startup truth for examining a new experience. For instance, one can start with a previously argued definition of a classical garden, returning to that metaphor we used before, as one that uses symmetry and decorous, curvy, linear flourishes to imply that nature is beautiful when controlled by human sense of order. Logicians would call this statement the major premise. On viewing a particular garden, if the writer-thinker finds that all the plant arrangements and walkways of the garden stress symmetry and decorous flourishes, they become supporting examples, or the minor premise for a deductive analysis. This is important here. The major and minor premises can then be brought together by a necessity, not probability as discussed in inductive analysis. Okay, this distinction here is very important. Rather than working from a probability standpoint, okay, think about, hey, I'm working through these sources. Probably, right? Probability states that this could be my thesis. Instead, I like what the Hoffmans are saying here. You are working from a place of necessity, and this is key, right? In essence, and if I could boil this down or make it a little bit simpler, when you're working deductively, you are asking yourself, what do I need? This is the key question, to establish or support my overall claim. Okay, and this is nothing foreign. We've all done this before. If you've written essays for any class, you've engaged in inductive thinking and deductive thinking when creating an essay, right? You start with a premise, that's deductive. Inductive thinking asks that you do what? Build the premise from what you find in the sources. Okay, but let's think about this here. Okay, so moving on, to make a claim that this particular garden is a classical garden that implies nature is most beautiful when controlled by humans, logicians call this order of thinking a syllogism. And if you need to return to that, okay, syllogisms were talked about in Lunsford when we talked about deductive reasoning. In essence, when we talk about deduction and deductive reasoning, this is a review. Okay, I'm trying to look up that page. I should have had it ready, but it's okay. Just bear with me here. Syllogisms were mentioned, I believe. Let's see how good my memory is. Maybe page 73. Let's see how good I am. Okay, syllogisms here, 71, 72. Not bad. Okay, so if you want to revisit what a syllogism is, open up the Lunsford and look at page 71, 72. Let's move ahead here. Thesis. Deductive analysis encourages helpful connections with pre-existing ideas. For instance, deductive analysis helps determine the extent to which a work of art conforms to a definition of an artistic movement, whether, think about ciclo de oro there, for example, whether a business deal supported by tested business practices, whether a couple's personal intimacy matches a psychological profile for a healthy relationship, whether a legal case conforms to legal precedent, how the mandala, a design that aids meditation by drawing attention from its borders toward the center, explains the nature of baseball. Okay, gets a little bit kind of crazy here. How a feminist theory clarifies a Shakespearean play. How Painter's Manifesto evaluates a greeting card, or how work by Immanuel Kant exposes the worth of a Protestant moral stance. Okay, for deductive analysis, the writer researches different theories and concepts that might help to better understand the primary source, the opposite of withheld judgment under inductive analysis. Okay, so in a sense, it's not like you're holding on to judgment, but you're coming in deductively with a judgment already in mind. Okay, and then uses these as a thesis. Screening, this is important here, right here, screening in only those details of the primary source that have implications that validate the thesis. Okay, so working backwards, and let me just walk you through this real quick. Working backwards, you will then screen or filter. Filter is another good word here. Through the information to support or yeah, actually, that's what I want to stick with, to support your overall claim or thesis. Okay. And then uses these screening in the little details of the primary source that have implications that validate the thesis. Unlike a biased person or someone committing a hasty generalization, which we will talk about later in the class, the deductive thinker accepts the thesis as vulnerable, a startup truth that can vanish if not enough of the primary sources particulars support the thesis, or if the thesis is not helpful in understanding the primary material. This is important here. Not only is this a way to approach a work of literature or an essay, for example, or research paper is a great example. This is also a way to test your claim, thinking deductively. If you find, and this is a great way, and this is how critical thinkers navigate the world, is being a critical thinker. You understand that sometimes your thesis is vulnerable, and it should be vulnerable. If it is disproven when the sources, or you're finding when you screen or filter, you do not have enough to substantiate your claim, this is when you must revisit your thesis and take a look back at your thesis or overall claim. Okay, this is important. Writing instructors, I'm right here, and tend to think that an essay is deductive if the thesis is at the beginning of an essay, and not all writing instructors, but just as with the inductive analysis, the thesis can occur anywhere. Introduction, body, conclusion, and can even not be stated, rather implied throughout the essay. Inductive and deductive analysis describe the initial thinking that goes into any essay and not its final organization. Okay, so when we're thinking of inductive and deductive in the realm of essay writing, this is almost in your pre-writing, or in essence, your pre kind of thinking stage, if you will. Okay, these are your initial thoughts about how to attack a reading. In this unit, I want you to test that. Okay, understand when you are being inductive and understand when you are being deductive. Okay, your essay will ask specifically for this, and we're going to go more in depth with the claim cast. Okay, when we talk about evaluation and resemblance claim. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I kind of want to move on here. Let's just go over kinks and we'll be done with this. Since deductive analysis cannot advance beyond its major and minor premises, it is not as likely to nurture original thought as inductive analysis. And that's the distinction here, right? Inductive analysis, I feel like, gives you more to work with. Deductive analysis, or approaching anything deductively, can be limiting in a sense, especially if your thesis is hyper vulnerable, hyper limited, etc. Okay, for instance, in the humanities, definitions of intellectual movements and aesthetic theories are often used as a thesis for deductively analyzing a painting. Think about what we do with Las Meninas. A poem or a musical score, and subtle nuances of the work that make it unique are ignored as the thinker focuses only on details that support the chosen theory. If we approach Las Meninas just from a place of artistic merit, for example, maybe we are eliminating our exploration of the painting as a shout for critical thought processes, thinking differently, understanding the medium as a way to engage the world differently. Okay, instead of just examining the brushstrokes, for example, right? Examining the Infanta at the center. It's much more. That's why I love that painting, because it has so much more to offer. Okay, so if I went in with just the premise of like, oh, I want to only examine the people in the painting, well, then that limits me, as we saw the way Steele discusses the painting in the poem, or Pushchak, etc. Okay. Also, there's never, let's return to the reading. Also, there's never a full guarantee that the theory evolved in the past through careful inductive thinking, or if it did, that the circumstances or details that were used to form the thesis have not changed. Worst, weak deductive thinkers start milling material to conform to the thesis, and this is important here, sapping any essay's credibility based on that thesis. The problem with using the intentions of the primary source as the thesis is explained under inductive analysis. Okay, and this is where you have to always question if your thesis is vulnerable, weak, or it's been tested enough inductively. Okay, this is very important here. If you then think deductively and the sources unravel your thesis and you still don't change your thesis, this is weak critical thinking. Okay. So now that we've understood inductive versus deduction, let's move on to the claim cast lesson and have a deeper understanding of building a resemblance and evaluation claim. See you soon.